ESPN, I think it's Adam Rittenberg, who does a good job writing for the Four Letter Network. He put together an article titled Ranking College Football's Biggest Underachievers. And I don't think this is like an all-time list. So we'll keep it recent and then we'll get to the all-time conversation because you're obviously an encyclopedia when it comes to college football history. But let's say in the last 10, 15 years, if I were to ask you to maybe guess some of the teams on this list of the biggest underachievers in college football, who would you guess?
Texas and Texas A&M.
Yeah, great call. Those are two of the top three on this list, and A&M is actually in a tier of its own. So Rittenberg literally tiers these teams into different groups and sort of gives descriptions about why each team falls into the tier that they fall in. But A&M is number one on this list as the most disappointing team in college football. They talk about their 2020 season where, hey, they only lost one game. Obviously, it was that Fugazi shortened COVID season, but they had a great year. They ended up in the top 5 in the postseason poll. They won that bowl game against Mac Brown in North Carolina. It felt like they had things going in the right direction. They had that historically good recruiting class that they brought in right after that, but obviously an underwhelming 2021 and then a disastrous 2022 where they didn't even make a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, boy, we're talking about Sark, and look, Sark has a lot in front of him, and Sark does need to win 9, 10 games this year. Man, Jimbo, this is going to be like, I can't wait to watch this year, especially with Jimbo. But then all of a sudden you bring in Bobby Petrino. Like, how much is he going to actually give him? Is this going to be your show or my show? No, I mean, they're in a spot where I don't think they get rid of him this year. But, man, Jimbo's got more pressure than Sark does, and that says a lot.
I think you're right. And I wonder if the Aggies would have made a move on Jimbo this offseason if the buyout wasn't $90+ million.
Right.
After next year, it's still over 75 mil, KD. So you think A&M can print money. They're close to Texas when it comes to just financial resources, but still, that is a shit ton of money, dude. We're talking about $77 million all guaranteed to pay a coach to not leave. I mean, could that basically guarantee that Jimbo's there for at least 2 years, almost regardless of what happens this year?
Yeah, I mean, unless he goes like 2-9 or 2-10, but I mean, they're not going to do that. And hell, they got the SEC schedule, so they've got 4 built-in wins. But yeah, I mean, he needs. If he goes 7-5 this year, do they fire him, BK?
I don't think so, but I think if they go 5-7, I think if they miss a bowl game again, like I don't think it has to be as bad as 2-10 or 3-9. I think if they just miss a bowl game this year, then they'll pony up the money and they'll let them go.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I mean they don't print money, but they're pretty close, and they've got a ton of money, and they also, I mean, I know you've got Aggie friends, like we're going on from 1939, like. They want to win a national championship. They want to be relevant. They've got everything in place, the resources and everything in place to be a big-time program, and they just never have been in my lifetime. They really haven't been ever. And I'm not throwing shade at A&M. Those are the facts.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
They've done.
They're the most underachieving sports program in college athletics in my lifetime. For what they have. They got a fan base that cares. They've got tons of money. They're in the state of Texas. And, they've won 6 games in Omaha. They had a run with AC Law, and the football program hadn't done shit in my life. I mean, they were good with RC Slocum, but even then, I mean, the best A&M football team I've ever seen was 1994. And they lost to Notre Dame 24-21 in the Cotton Bowl. Like, I mean, that they just have not. And when I'll have real conversation with Aggie friends of mine, I'll be like, hey, like it is what it is. And they almost like look around, they're like, yeah, we haven't done what we should have done. I'm like, yeah, no shit, you haven't, but they don't like to say it publicly, but privately they're like, yeah, it's embarrassing and we should be doing more. Yeah. And by the way, Texas is that to some degree too, but they've also won 3 baseball championships in my lifetime, 1 football championship. Basketball has gotten a hell of a lot better, but we still feel like Texas fans, we left a lot on the table, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Texas is on this list as well of underachieving programs, but there are at least times in our lifetimes that we can point to say, no, Texas actually did what it was supposed to do in sports. And for A&M, you're right, my lifetime, your lifetime. I mean, this has been decades of them just perennially underachieving. And it's not
Yeah.
just football, it goes beyond all sports, but obviously football is the big moneymaker. That's the one you use the word desperate. They're most desperate to get that one right. And I did find this interesting, KD, because this article from Rittenberg actually mentions a couple of potential replacement candidates for Jimbo Fisher, talking about Sonny Dykes at TCU and also talking about Jeff Traylor at
Jeff Taylor.
UTSA. Would
Yeah.
either of those guys, and this is, years down the road, and maybe Aggie fans don't even want to think about something like this, but either of those guys, would they instill some fear that, hey, maybe they can finally be the guy that wakes A&M up and has them doing what they're probably supposed to be doing?
Yeah. Traylor obviously with his connections around the state of Texas would scare me a little bit. And Sonny Dykes is a damn good coach. Sonny Dykes is a lot better coach than I thought he was.
Yeah. Yeah, with what he did last year at TCU, it's you got to give him his flowers, man. Incredibly impressive to do that in any year, but to do that in year one, that was legit. So yeah, I think of Jeff Traylor, and I think of the Joey McGuire thing at Texas Tech.
Yep,
And obviously,
exactly.
they haven't done a ton, but look, last year they beat Texas and OU for the first time in school history. They're recruiting very well. They're ranked in the coaches poll top 25, which yeah, it's a preseason poll, but shit, the vibes right now in Lubbock are pretty good. And obviously, Jeff Traylor has a lot of those same things that McGuire had with those connections across the state that you were talking about.
That's exactly what I was thinking about when you mentioned Traylor. I'm like, that's Joey McGuire. That's what McGuire's doing at Texas Tech. Hey, how much with TCU? How much of this was Riley, who's now at Clemson with Cade Klubnik?
That's a great question. Yeah, I don't know if it's Riley. I don't know how much of it was Duggan, who, funny enough, didn't even start
Right.
the year as the starter last
I'm
year.
not
Uh,
crazy.
I mean, they lost Kendre Miller, their top running back. They lost Quentin Johnston, their top receiver. They lost their best defensive players. Like, it's going to be tough. I think we all expect TCU to take a pretty decent sized step back this year. It might be tough to pinpoint exactly how much blame that we put on each part of what's leaving because, yeah, player wise and coach wise, they lost a ton.
They did. That was my niece's senior year at
Oh,
TCU. And I was like, so she's going to all the playoff games, doing everything. She's like, this is awesome. I'm like, I was happy for her. My sister works there. So I root for TCU when they're not playing Texas.
yeah. Meanwhile, I got to be excited about going to an Alamo Bowl because that was the best we did during my 4 years in Austin. Jesus Christ, man. All right, so A&M is in.
02 to 05. That would have been the
Uh,
heyday if you could have gone to Texas.
yep, and I
Two
know, I'm sure
baseball
you do.
championships, Final Four,
Yeah.
football championship.
Mm,
I don't think they lost a home game at DKR probably that whole time.
man, yeah, you and I both know people who were at UT during those 4 years, and
Oh,
I don't like to be jealous. I'm generally not jealous, but I am very envious of people who got to be students during that run because that's as good as it gets.
yeah.
So A&M's number one. They're in the top tier. Then you've
Yep.
got this next tier that includes 3 teams. It's tier 2. It's CFP no-show. So I guess this is more focusing on the recent times since the advent of the college football playoff. You've got USC, you've
Yep.
got Miami, and
Yep.
you've got Texas. Do you agree with all 3 of those teams kind of being in the same category? Look, none of those teams have made it to the college football playoff. USC was close last year. They effed it up in the conference championship game. Texas hasn't been close at all since the playoff came about, and Miami's been just a shit show, for lack of a better phrase, really for the last 20 or so years. So those 3 teams kind of feel accurate behind A&M as perennial underachievers, at least in recent years.
Yeah. Because all 3 are big brands. And so, Miami didn't do dick until 79 and when Schnellenberger got there. But, you know, we're at 2023 now. So we're talking about 40 years of they are a big brand, a big name. And if I would have told you in 2001 that Miami was not going to be, or going to be a college football playoff and they're not in any of them, you'd be like, what? And not only are they not in, they haven't sniffed it, dude.
Yeah.
USC has kind of sniffed it. Texas really haven't sniffed it either. But those 3 names are big brand names. Texas and USC, more traditional blue bloods, but Miami's Miami. Like, I've just been waiting for Miami to get back to kind of at least relevance. defense,
Yep.
because they haven't been relevant, dude. And that's the craziest thing. I mean, I think about the 90s with Florida, Florida State, and Miami. They were like three of the best programs in college football. And all three have kind of had their own little weird, issues. I think Florida State, they look like they're kind of coming back.
Yeah, yeah. I want Miami to be good because I was a kid the last time Miami was good, but I remember some of just what that fan base was like, and obviously what that program was like when they were firing on all cylinders. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun when they've got things rolling. They can be very fun to watch. Now, I hope Miami basketball loses every game from now until eternity. I'm still not over that bullshit that took place in the Elite Eight. I am happy the Texas baseball team avenged that loss in the Coral Gables Regional. So shout out to the Texas baseball team for coming through in the clutch in that spot. But yeah, Miami football. How about these numbers, KD? Since 2003, when they shared the Big East championship, they are 152 and 99 as a program. And since 2009, they have 0 top 10 finishes and just 3 top 25 finishes.
3?
3. That's in the last, 13, 14 years since 09?
Wow.
3 times Miami has finished the year ranked in the top 25 at all. Like, as bad as Texas has been, we've at least been better than that.
Yeah, no, it makes me feel good. I mean, and I've let my parents down, but not like my sister has. You know what I mean? I don't mean that a shot at man. That's one of those where it's like, dude, I've not lived up to what I should have, but that is worse than that. I mean,
Yeah.
3, that's crazy.
Yep, absolutely. And then obviously USC on there too. They've been close. You feel like they've got a chance with Lincoln Riley. You feel like Texas has a chance. You feel like both of those programs have the right coaches leading the charge right now. But yeah, that's the CFP no-show tier on this ESPN article.
USC's got to get their defense in order, man. And I thought I was an Alex Grinch guy going back to Washington State. I mean, I was kind of on him early on, and I've been surprised that I mean, I don't think he, like Kwiatkowski, we talked about him earlier. I don't think he forgot how to coach defense, but it hadn't really been working out for him and them. Going back to OU, but certainly at USC. Like, I mean, if their defense gets their shit together at least a little bit, they should be in the playoff.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was terrified when Oklahoma hired Alex Grinch from Wazoo a few years ago. Like, I thought that
Ohio
marriage.
State. Remember, he was Wazoo, then Ohio
Right.
State for 1 year. Right.
Great call. Great call. Yeah, I thought Alex Grinch was going to work, and he didn't work in Norman. Lincoln Riley brought him over to USC to give him a chance to try to fix things out there, and things did not go well in year one. Now, once again, USC
he's still there, right?
still there. Yeah, a lot of USC fans wanted him fired, but Lincoln Riley decided to give him a second season out there. So clearly, Lincoln believes in what Alex Grinch is selling, but I don't know if anybody else really does because the results just haven't been there at all. And yeah, they made it to the Pac-12 title game. Hard to call that year a complete failure, but they had a chance to make it to the playoff. All they had to do was beat Utah, and they got punked in that game. That wasn't even close.
Yeah. No, man, Utah. We talk about the programs that haven't lived up to what they should. Utah is like on the flip side of that. If Rittenberg did an article like that, like it's pretty impressive what Utah has done. And you talk about culture and building a culture. We talked about the White Sox yesterday and how shitty their culture is. Man, Utah's built a very impressive culture.
Yeah, I'm almost glad that Texas doesn't have to deal with Utah in the Big 12.
I'm totally with you.
Because they're a pain in the ass, and they are big game hunters, right? They've beaten some big programs and big games in recent years, and you're right, they seemingly always do more than less. Well, Texas, as we unfortunately know, has done less with more. There are 6 tiers on this article. I'm not reading all 6. I'll just read the next 3, and then I'll ask you if there's somebody that you think should be on here that's not on here. The next tier is called Big City Blues. So I guess this is focusing on teams that play in or near major markets that you think, hey, maybe because of that, because of their talent around them, they'd be able to have some success, but they just haven't been able to get it done. You've got UCLA, Maryland, and Arizona State in this bunch. You think those 3 teams maybe fit the mold for teams that probably should be doing more considering where they are and what their programs could be?
I mean, I guess Maryland because the DC area, and there's so much talent there. But Maryland's never been worth a shit football.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess I get that a little bit. UCLA is funny. UCLA should be, but UCLA is a weird school, man. I actually worked with a kid who was out there who played for them, and I was like, dude, what's going on? Like, why is UCLA? How come they're not living up to what they should? He was like, well, I'll tell you one thing. He's like, the real estate's so expensive there. He was living with three other football players in the same dorm, like room. Like,
No
I'm like,
way.
what? Like, you kidding me? He's like, yeah. He's like, it starts there. And I was like, oh shit. So UCLA has their own issues, stuff like that no one knows about. And you're like, I was like, what? Like, you really? He's like, yeah. He's like, you got like four guys and like, he's like, it was a bigger room, but it's still room.
God, these guys were on scholarship too?
Yes, yes.
I figured, like, all right, if you make the walk-ons do something like that, then screw them. They're just
Right.
walk-ons. But scholarship players having to do that?
Scholarship players. And I was like,
Oh,
all right, you don't need to say anything else. I'm like, I get it now.
yeah, that is brutal. Hey, while we were talking about Utah, and by the way, like, I think UCLA is in a separate tier than Maryland and Arizona State. Like, I've never viewed those two schools as like sleeping giants or teams. I mean, obviously, I'm
Yeah,
sure their fans want to do more, but I've never viewed them as schools that have to do more. UCLA is one that, like, I've always
yeah,
felt like should be doing more with what they've got.
totally agree. It's UCLA, but I'm with you on that. I mean, Arizona State too. Arizona State had a run. They would have weird kind of runs. Hot, cold, but mainly cold. Like, no, I mean, Arizona and Arizona State are not one of those where I'm like, they should be great. No, they should be good.
Yeah, agreed with that. What about this question from Jake? Will Utah run the new Big 12?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they're going to run it, but I'm with you. I'm glad we're not playing them.
Yeah.
That is a physical fucking game when you play against them, and they've got this thing rolling. They've got the culture set up. They've had coaches that have been there forever that aren't seemingly not going anywhere, and they've got the right recipe. So I don't know if they run it, but if you told me, hey, in the first 5 years they win the Big 12 two or three times, I'd buy that.
We all know who's going to run the Big 12, though, once Texas and Oklahoma leave, right?
Well, it runs through Lubbock, right?
Yeah. Well, they'll tell you it's always run through Lubbock. Those Tech fans, they're something else.
Who's going to run it?
Fighting Kansas Jayhawks, baby.
Oh, God.
Kansas football is back. I'm not even sure they ever left. I don't even remember them leaving.
Yeah,
They're
no,
taking
I
over.
felt like Todd Reesing, an 11-win team, was like yesterday,
Yeah, it does. I think Todd Reesing's like 22, 23 years old right now. I think
That
that
was
checks
pretty
out.
fun, though. Yeah. Reesing, Chase Daniel, and like Kansas, Missouri, they were two top five teams, weren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they had a border war one year that was huge back in 2008 that like determined the spot in the Big 12 title game, and College Game Day was there for that.
That
It was
is
nuts.
nuts.
And you talk about those two quarterbacks, that was the Big 12 with Colt, with Bradford, and with Graham Harrell, too. You had all five of those guys, like all, you could argue, like legendary college quarterbacks, all of
Yeah.
those guys in the same league at the same time. I don't know if the Big 12 was ever better from a QB perspective.
No, I don't think it was. You're right. I forgot about those guys, obviously. But no, the Big 12 was, the Big 12 is one of those that I never felt like it got the love nationally it probably deserved. The Big 12 was a pretty good fucking conference when it was really rolling.
Yep, agreed.